Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel and welcome to a new type of video. This is going to be a questions and answered video. These are questions that I've held on to for like a year and a half through the course of my channel, and I've been meaning to get them addressed for a very, very long time. And these are common questions that come up in very different videos that I do and I've sort of held on to. If you haven't noticed, I'm in a completely new office. I have moved across states here in the US and I love it here. And I'm sure you guys have already sort of noticed I'm in a different sort of place and I'm very excited about it. What else? If you're new to me, you can, if you're new to the channel, welcome, hello. If you like these videos, if you feel like they're valuable to you, you can hit the like button, subscribe button, you can't miss with any of the buttons. And if you feel like these videos are helpful to you in your recovery, you can support the channel and the work that goes into this channel on my Patreon. And if you just want to connect with me, you can go over to my website and just sort of say hi or sort of sign up for some coursework that I'm doing. And I will have all the links in the description of this video. So let's just dive in. The first one that I get was a very common question that I had said something in a video that was my 6 unknown childhood trauma triggers video. And I got a couple questions. Let's just get into them. So the first, someone wrote in, I appreciate the concept of holding parents accountable, but many times it's one-sided. These type of parents don't connect with these ideas that they were responsible for their adult children's behavior as an adult. My own family ticks several of these boxes with a lot of overlap, but they have never and will never admit that they were responsible for my behavioral issues. And another person wrote in, I'm really confused about holding parents accountable. How do you do that? I don't think talking to them or telling them how I felt is a realistic option for me. Dad is clueless. Mom didn't react very well when I brought up the past. Could someone explain this to me? So what I meant in that video is sort of, it's a unique concept that is not, it's not exactly rare, but a lot of therapists don't really kind of get into it. It is holding parents accountable for the way that they parented, for the dangerous situations that they put their children in, and essentially for the trauma. We're also holding our parents accountable, and this is tricky, for not doing their own work, not being conscious. And what I mean by that, or what we do in sort of the therapy process, is we don't go to toxic parents and hold them accountable directly. We do it in sort of therapy. We do that in talking with the trauma therapist and some exercises that my mentor taught me how to do. My mentor, Amanda Curtin, is to do empty chair work, where we bring a toxic parent into the therapy room and we pretend that they're sitting in a chair, and we sort of, the client talks to the parent about how they parented and sort of is able to sort of hold them accountable and sort of put them on the spot instead of usually the parent is putting the child on the spot. And really telling the truth to this parent. Another way we do it is sort of, we do, in my group work, we do letters to a toxic parent, where the whole group is witnessing a person really taking on their parent and telling them the truth about the physical abuse, the sexual abuse, the emotional abuse, not protecting, being sort of addicted to substances, all of it. So we're doing it in a very specific way that is not, that's done in therapy and is not done with the parent in person, because chances are they're going to be so defensive about it. If they're really highly toxic, it's just sort of not going to go well, and it's just kind of wasted breath. And believe me, take my word for it, as I very much tried with my own family system to try to get them to get it, and that really got me nowhere. So the healing comes from essentially having witnesses who can witness your relationship with the person, like a therapist or a group or a therapist that gets it. And that's what I mean about holding them accountable. Another way to do it is when you notice that you're triggered, when you notice you're stuck places, when you notice what comes up as you're trying to practice inner child work, instead of blaming yourself for your reactions, for your situations and stuff, is to hold the parents accountable in your mind. There's a whole other concept that I could do a video on. It's what I call the setup. That, for example, if you sort of really struggle with managing money and you just can't get it together sort of about money, I have my client look at how they were parented about money. I look at how the client what was modeled for them about money. And then to get the shame and blame off of themselves when something comes up around money, I want them to be thinking about how they were set up and holding their parents accountable for not parenting them in that way. As a side note, this is a controversial issue. Many therapists would just scream at me about, well, maybe that's not fair, about how you can't blame your parents. It's almost like I identify with Buddhism, but it's also sort of a Buddhist kind of concept. And just the idea, like you're just passing the buck, you're just blaming what was going on for them. I really don't find that any of that really works. And if other people can make it work, that's perfectly, there's no right or wrong way to do this, but the way that I'm doing this in this work is really holding the parents accountable until we're healed, until we become indifferent to our own sort of stories. So that's what that accountability piece means. Okay, so moving on is in that same video, the 6 unknown childhood trauma videos, people had questions about, I made a reference that children will leave their body when they're being screamed at. And someone wrote in, I would love to hear more about the leaving your body you mentioned. Sounds interesting. Another person wrote in, it's great video, thank you. What does it mean when a child is raged at so much they leave their body? That reference is about dissociation. Young children who are being screamed at, or they're in an uncomfortable sort of situation, or they're being abused emotionally, physically, or sexually, our bodies are wired to keep us safe and to sort of survive that moment. And we leave the emotional body and we go into our head. And that is also what is known as dissociation, meaning that we're not fully in the whole body and we are gone into a survival mode of fight, flight, freeze, cry for help, shame, or submit. So if we have a toxic adult who is screaming at a 6-year-old or a 4-year-old or even younger, God forbid, that is way too much on that child's system and they will go into a survival mode. It usually looks like they might be looking at their shoes, they might be they might be crying or whatever. But normally, if you've heard the term waiting for the storm to pass, that waiting is just going into our heads and leaving our emotional body. Healthy children who are not abused at home, they're in their body, they're spontaneous. They're thinking almost a little bit narcissistically because that's age appropriate. Like, am I gonna have spaghetti today? Are we gonna have Fruit Loops for breakfast? What am I gonna watch today? Traumatized kids are thinking about, like, if I make this creak, I'm gonna get stepped at. And those are thoughts that are like, those are thoughts about monitoring about what the adults are gonna do. So that's what that idea means about leaving our body. We all sort of have, growing up in these families, we all do it on some level. And to be a little bit numb or disconnected from our emotions, where you can't sort of feel the full range of spontaneity and joy and grief and sadness, that usually means that you're in your head, not connected with your emotional body. And being in your head is almost like vigilant or very cerebral. So that's what I mean by that one. Moving on. This was an interesting question that someone wrote in about a concept that I made in a video about hypervigilance. Are you hypervigilant? It was about they notice that they go into a deer in the headlights. And this is related to the last question. Can you explain the deer in the headlights look on someone's face? I've been through a lot of trauma in my whole life. I'm now 35. Almost everyone I've ever met says I look like that. It's a bit embarrassing. I often stare at myself in the mirror to see what they're talking about, but I don't see it. And I know that that question might sound vague, but I know what they're sort of talking about. I think as trauma survivors, I've been told in work situations while I was in the middle of my work in my early 20s, is they would say, like, Patrick, are you okay? You look intense right now. And that internal experience wouldn't match up with what I was exhibiting on the outside, what we call affect. Meaning affect, like my face and my eyebrows are going up right now. This is how people read my expressions and know what's going on with me emotionally. So deer in the headlights look is, I find that the person's probably triggered 24/7 in some, they may exist 24/7 on some level. They may exist in a bit of survival mode or intensity, and that is red on our face, but we don't know it because, related to the last question, we're not fully connected with our body. So if you've ever been told, like, whoa, you're pretty intense right now, and that doesn't match up your insides, it just means that you could look at it in many ways, that the adult and the inner child aren't connected, that we're not integrated, which is a very sort of common symptom of childhood trauma. And it is a bit embarrassing. It is a bit annoying. And that's what I find clinically, what's sort of going on. That the more work we do, the more that we calm our system, the more we know what our emotions are, I find that this thing resolves itself. So there's that one. Moving on. This is a very interesting question. related to sort of rage. This came from a video that was my 6 unknown childhood trauma videos. This was a follow-up called Tools and Exercises. Someone's writing in and says, how do I not care when someone's mindlessness makes my job harder and directly affects me? I would love to not care about this stuff. I just don't know how to stop my reaction. It's helpful to make this connection to my parental treatment, but I'm like mad about that too. So how do I care less? People are complex, okay, but how does that make it okay to be jerks though? Or how do I not get mad at legitimate jerky behavior? And I think somewhere in that they were talking about sort of road rage or someone cutting them off in traffic. It's a great question, and it's a complicated question. These ideas that I'm putting through in my videos are, hopefully they're helpful to you guys, but it's not just like poof, like the person sort of saying, oh, people are complicated, get over it. You just got cut off and had to slam on your brakes and now you're having an adrenaline reaction just because someone wants to be a jerk or someone is sort of just plain out is a jerk. I find that when we do work around our family system of origin, we're going to be experiencing a lot of rage, a lot of grief, a lot of unprocessed emotions. And the more that we process those emotions, I find that this stuff gets better. When in my group work, in my individual work, I'm having my clients do rage work, or it's really more about truth work, where I'm having them hit a karate bag, I'm having them sort of break plates, I'm having them rip up t-shirts, something tactile to get a charge out. It's also related to the first question about holding our parents accountable. The more we sort of drain our childhood trauma, the more calm, the more chill that we are. So I'd really love for you guys to continue in some way, even though it's like we have limited over YouTube and stuff like that, but I'll do a whole other video about doing some rage work sort of on your own to release the charge of this stuff. I find that it's more powerful and more digs in deeper when we have a witness to doing rage work about that. So the person's sort of asking, what if there are jerks at work, jerks on the road, jerks everywhere? Is I find that those folks are gonna trigger us, but jerks have been around since humans have been around, and we also have a lot of great people around that we're not sort of thinking about. That's just a concept. It's not like poof, oh, it's gonna make it better. But if we really focus on the unfairness from childhood, the people taking advantage, the selfishness of our parents and getting the rage out there, I find that to drain that stuff, and by drain, I just mean like we finish that unfinished business. We become more chill in the present, which is what I love about doing child work. So there's that one. Another one, moving on, this is another great question related to a video that I did sort of about people who are very dismissive emotionally, people who are very shut down. You can almost think about an attachment style of dismissive avoidant. And someone wrote in, and this was very informative. You described my ex-husband's personality. Do you think it's possible that the childhood trauma you speak of could actually make someone overcompensate emotions for others by caring too much and hurting themselves emotionally in the process? Such a good question. And I think about when we are children growing up with parents who are emotionally illiterate, growing up with parents who are in a toxic marriage or a power struggle in that way, or simply we have a highly depressive parent or a highly alcoholic parent. Children are very smart, and often there's usually one child in the family that my mentor Amanda Curtin says, feels everything for the family. So if we have a very sort of tragic, shut down, emotionally repressed father, sometimes, I know it sounds weird, but children almost do the feelings for that parent. And that is sort of the beginnings of our codependency. So absolutely, we can overcompensate in caring too much, and we become selfless. That's another way we can sort of leave our body, is we're so focused on a tragic parent or an abused parent, what they're going through, and we leave our own sort of sense of self. And how is that overcompensating is in the family system, there's such a deficit for caring feelings. Children are heart-based, children are caring in general until we become traumatized and lose bits of that, even though that we can get it back. But if you're that person that identifies as being highly sensitive or being an empath, which is, I also think half of that, a lot of that is around hypervigilance. I don't think it's sort of about a special quality about ourselves. it is extremely, it is a gift to be highly sensitive, but I see in our culture is people confusing being an absolute empath. This is a little bit dangerous. An absolute empath and not recognizing that they're hypervigilant as well in that. So I'm not trying to take it away from you, but that's sort of what I mean by that. So that overcompensating for other people's emotions is absolutely sort of a trauma thing. And the work around it is to let others be responsible for their own feelings, to really almost have a force field around ourselves throughout the day, to try to not take it on, to not allow our inner child to do that for others, because that inner child is going to be drawn to tragic, sad people, partners and stuff like that, to try to get something going there emotionally for those folks. So that's what I mean by that. Moving on. This is a big one, and this is going to be a separate video unto itself, if not a webinar, is what happens when our inner child and our adult is not jiving. Oftentimes, the adult does not want the job of taking care of the inner child. Oftentimes, that the inner child is enraged at the adult for not doing anything further. Let me read you guys a question related to this, and this is probably a huge takeaway for this one. Is someone wrote in, I think that this was from my Instagram actually. Hello Patrick, I have liked and listened to your YouTube presentations for some time now, and I found them insightful and useful. I would like to ask about the inner child guided meditation. That's what this video was on. It tells you to ask your inner child whether you can sit down next to them, and the child says sure. I have never had this experience doing inner child work because that part of me is furious with the adult self. So my inner child would never say that. And it's funny, I thought about that as I was making that meditation video. I was thinking about those of us who are not going to have to do some work ahead of time. I think I mentioned it in there about joining or really sort of clearing the air between the adult and the inner child. So what do you suggest? Many thanks, best wishes. Okay, so on this one is a huge piece from childhood trauma. I think in our childhood, we learned to self-hate because we couldn't make things better. I think that this can happen in a couple ways. If we grow up in that sort of anti-love family with a really nasty parent who has a lot of contempt for their children, that is sort of that really abusive message that you're a bad kid. And you can almost see the finger pointing like so I can't believe you did this, you never think about me, that kind of a thing. And that is to be directly shamed. And then when we are directly shamed, we start to hate ourselves. Like, oh, why did I ask for milk money? Or like, oh, why did I do that? I'm such a jerk kid. I'm such a, I can never get things right. So that's one way we can develop self-hate that this inner child might hold on to. Another way is that if children can't make things better, related to the question prior about overcompensating, if they can't fix a tragic parent, if they can't make it sort of the family be nicer, if they can't sort of get dad to wake up by doing drawings for him, wake up emotionally, that's another way that children can self-hate. So this is a little bit sort of complicated. So there's a lot of children just tend to point the blame towards self, and I think it's just part of their sort of development when they're growing up in that. So there's that. And for the adult part of it is, when people start to do this work, they're usually all inner child, and they may be existing in a level of being triggered in a 24/7 sort of way. So over time, trying to get this adult in place there's going to have to be sort of a clearing of the air. I will really sort of work with a client to sort of say, to really get their adult in place. And if they come to me and they're sort of saying, I keep picking toxic partners, I struggle with money, I can't get my career together, I'm struggling with decisions, I'm trying to get their adult in place. And I'm trying to get there to be sort of some self-respect and some self-esteem going on there, which takes a while. Then if we start to do some dialoguing, work with an inner child, and that inner child is pissed, like, where have you been? You're not safe, you date bad people, blah, 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 which is a bit of a paradox because both of those parts are the same person. So by clearing the air, the adult would sort of say something like, I'm really working hard, I haven't really been just telling the truth, to be honest. I'm really working hard, I'm new to therapy, I'm new to all this, we're the same person. But here's the kicker, guys, is that for the adult to say, I think all of that hate energy really belongs to mom and dad, not me, because you and I are the same person. So a lot of the work is about getting the adult in place. What I call, to get the adult, I might ask somebody, does your adult want the job of taking care of yourself? Because often that adult really isn't in place and they're mostly inner child, and the adult is like, I don't want to do it, I want somebody else to do it. Which I get, and that's kind of a fair, it's a fair and valid thing, but it's just not really going to work. So I have to sort of do some work around that to say, like, it's up to you. It's really you're the main person driving your recovery. So there's not going to be a partner or a therapist that's really going to do that for you. And I know that they're not really sort of asking for that. So to get that adult in place, and over time there is a clearing of the air that this inner child slowly, and capital S slowly, starts to warm up to this adult. But there is some boundary setting. You can't be that rageful at me because we're the same person. We were set up for this. So it's a lot of trying to undo a lot of conditioning for this inner child. And that inner child is really going to be stubborn. I don't really sort of like you. So small little victories. They may not be able to do an extensive left hand, right hand, inner child work, journaling, exercise, writing, but they might for a month, just to say, like, sort of, hey, little Jill, I'm just checking in and I'm thinking about you because I haven't forgotten you. And to do that for a month is a slow victory in of itself, especially when there's that self-hatred thing. So that's such a big concept. Again, I would like to do a webinar on that down the road if you guys would be interested in that. And another app person asked the same question: how do I address that self-disgust and contempt? So there's that. So moving on, this is related to other questions. This one was about sort of my was I abused? This was sort of one of my first videos that has the questionnaire on it. This was an animated video. And I kept getting this question on this video. And someone wrote in, I feel like I'm never sure enough of myself to give enough definitive answers, or maybe I'm deeply traumatized and don't know it, or something else. Is that a sign? It is absolutely a sign. When we grow up in these systems, we're a bit dissociative, we're a bit in our head, we're a bit in indecision, and we haven't really been sort of parented or been safe enough to trust our gut and to trust and to really know ourselves. But I think there's a part of us that does. So when people were answering those questions, they were like, I don't know, do I try to get through things? That sounds right, but maybe I haven't gotten this right. Maybe I'm not understanding the question. I think that is our inner child doing a self-protective thing about not wanting to sort of pull the trigger on that question and say yes or no. My mentor, Amanda Curtin, will sort of work with a client who's very indecisive about who to believe. Do I believe mom? Do I believe dad? Do I believe my roommate? And they could get caught up in this triangle thing. And my mentor will simply ask him, what do you think though? What do you think? Do you think your libido, like related to this question here, do you think you might struggle with your libido? Do you think you might try to get through things? Can you think about some examples in that way? So what I mean to answer this question is it's absolutely a trauma thing about sort of second guessing. We'll do that with romantic partners till the cows come home. Like, I don't know, they were 45 minutes late and I hated that, but maybe I'm a jerk and maybe I'm asking too much. Do you see that level of sort of thinking there? It's sort of like they might need just a therapist or a friend to be like, what do you mean they were 45 minutes late? That's a huge red flag, unless it was like they had a really good, like sort of a thing. Like that's like, if you were to go on a second date with them, it's sort of like the minute, if they're not on time again, then that confirms your red flag. People may need that level of bouncing it off on somebody to reclaim that ability. That's how it worked for me, to trust our gut. So there's that one. Next one is about hypervigilance. Someone wrote in, question for Patrick, can hypervigilance be a type of addiction to one's own brain chemicals and hormones, which are produced by the body in times of stress or danger? It seems that a hypervigilant person feels threatened even when they are in a safe space. We invest a lot of energy in getting into a place of physical, emotional, and financial safety, but when we successfully create that, it doesn't stop the hypervigilance. Love this question. Really love this question because it's so true. It kind of tells you that the inner child, I say it doesn't sound good, the inner child has a death grip on our defenses and our beliefs. So over time, getting our adult in place and watching these videos or going to therapy or being in recovery is slowly trying to release this grip. And the person makes a really great point about, so what happens if we get the partner and the house and the dog and everything we want and the career and the creativity? is that hypervigilance or not good enough or scanning or whatever that is, it doesn't really go away. So to answer their question, they were asking, is it like an addiction? And I was thinking about it, it's like, it's kind of I guess it kind of would be, in a way that, well, here's what is more of an addiction as a side note. Some people can be totally addicted to being upset. Totally addicted to, like, I can't believe this, and now my, I don't have enough, I'm running low on gas, and it's like they're looking for things. That I find is they're looking for a charge of something that is almost like a very, like, sort of morose self-pity kind of a thing. That there is a bit of a hit in that. But so I guess I wouldn't really kind of classify the hypervigilance thing as an addiction, but I would kind of call it maybe an addiction about how do I gotta keep myself safe? So usually this comes up, like the person mentioned, you get the car, the partner, the car, the kids, the career, and then the inner child is waiting for the other shoe to drop. That is a very common thing. So it is, I guess, I'm kind of on the fence about it. I guess you could call it an addiction, about being addicted to this idea about, I gotta keep myself safe. What's the next bad thing that's gonna happen? And, through doing some inner child work around the adult and the inner child, is to sort of maybe daily for a month, remind yourself that, like the doomsday scenario hasn't happened. And really sort of spend some time on it, this is probably the best way to work on it, is to try to sit in a place of not just cognitive gratitude, but to try to open up your heart space and open up and sort of to say, like, oh my God, just even 5 years ago, I wasn't even in this career, and now I've gone to school, and now I've done this thing. Or, I got out of credit card debt, and really try to take that sort of into your heart, because the inner child won't want that. The inner child is not interested in the good stuff in the present. They're just trying to confirm the awful stuff in the past. So the adult's job is to sort of, not just like daily reminders, but to really take it into your heart space, which the more work we do about opening our heart around other issues might make that sort of easier. Okay, and thanks for hanging in with me, guys. This has turned out to be pretty much a long video, but the last question was a very poignant question to me. It is about anxiety in the afternoon, related to videos that I did about anxiety in the morning and anxiety at night. Hi Patrick, love your work. Would you consider making a video about anxiety in the afternoon? Maybe it's just me, but I get bad anxiety in the late afternoon, early evening, which would be the time that Dad came home from work. Thanks. I get paralyzed and keep putting off responsibilities like getting dinner started and just hide out instead, at the same time getting more and more anxious that I'm not getting dinner ready. Really great question. And related to those videos, I think the person has nailed it when they were able to sort of say this would be the time that Dad came home. So to do some adult inner child work around that is around that time, let's just say again, for the course of a month, every day for a month, to try to journal and dialogue with your inner child, to remind yourself that you have the independence of living alone. Dad is not coming home. You are sort of totally safe. And to even sort of talk about those feelings, about what it would have been like. I can't tell you how many of my clients, this is a thing that the house would be sort of calm and okay, but the minute that they would see the headlights of the parent coming home, or the noise or the banging of dishes or whatever, really just sort of startles our system, and it becomes this thing that we anticipate. So to do some inner child work around it, be amazing to be able to reclaim the safety, and sort of like, again, with those sort of that death grip the inner child is going to hold on to, is that like evening and afternoon is not safe, and I'm going to sort of shut down about it, is to get the healthy adult in place, is to be parenting the kid around those times. And it's no different than those videos, or it's really no different if I have a client that needs to go ask for a raise and they shut down about that they have to advocate for themselves or something like that, that I might suggest to not take your inner child into that meeting with your boss. That's an idea of an adult sort of concept to do this. And I hope that was sort of helpful. Another thing that you could sort of do is just to sort of sit in the place for this person, is to sit in your own home and really try to be present and just try to enjoy that there's no angry lunatic coming home. So I hope that that video was helpful to you guys. If you found the video helpful, you can hit the like button, subscribe button. You can't miss with any of these buttons. And I will see you guys next time. And as always, guys, may you be filled with loving kindness. May you be well. May you be peaceful and at ease. May you be joyous. I will see you guys next time. Take care.